I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament Podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world, where science, philosophy, and social critique collide. It's always a pleasure to talk with Medium contributor and blogger George Tsakraklides as he tours us through the leading edge of science, communication, and social critique, all in the same breath.
It does give you that false perception that you are in the countryside sometimes because there are all these green spaces, and I'm lucky to have that. Otherwise, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And then the mixed bag part of my checking in is I'm just every day. I consider that I have got a pretty decent capacity to be present in the face of large scale stressors. I mean, that's the work I'm in and the work I've been in for a long time. But every day, my capacity is stretched to be present in the face of ways of being, um, cultural, governmental, corporate choices that just take my breath away.
America has a lot of those, doesn't it?
Yeah, just the brutality, the aggressive, willful ignorance. There are a lot of elements at play right now that, you know, I haven't even mentioned about how daunting it is to see the infusion of authoritarian governments around the world, and how they're just accelerating literally every negative metric. So that's the mixed bag part. And thank you for asking.
I think a good thing out of it, though, is the realization that they are authoritarian, which a lot of us were under the false impression that we were living in the free world of Western democracies, which is actually the most oppressive world by far. Anyway, that's a very deep conversation, but I think that I'm hoping that a lot of people are waking up because they're having more time to think, they're having more time to unplug themselves from this system, from what I call also the CO2 machine. That, you know, they're just taking plugs off the wall, and once you do that, you've got much better awareness.
Yeah. I'm curious. I just gave a bit of an extended check-in, and I'm wondering if you would do the same. How are you doing? What's on your mind and what's on your heart these days?
So I'm doing well. I've been writing a lot since the last time we spoke. I've been writing a lot more. I published a new book, which is a continuation of The Age of Separateness. I've got my own website and blog up and running. And I've been working, and I've been having time off work as well because of COVID, which is a good and a bad thing. So it's a mixed bag over here as well. Life is a mixed bag. You just have to take the good with the bad. And funnily enough, once you realize that, it's all good in the end, isn't it? It's all good. There's no good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, George, it's great to have you back here. I have been tracking some of your writing. I've been so busy that I have not been able to keep up with the writers that I really love to stay current with. You're one of them, and I've got a couple of ideas about today. But I think what I would much rather do is start with the invitation for you to really just take us in a direction. If you find yourself today, something is alive for you, something is really resonating in your system right now, and you are either currently writing about it or it's currently working you a little bit, I'd be happy to follow any new track like that. If you don't have something that's nudging on you that way, I've got a couple of suggestions from more or less recent writings that I'd be more than happy to uh, remind you of and see if you have any current updates about.
Sure. I mean, I guess from my perspective, and since the last time we spoke, I've been, I think the direction of my writing has taken me to a place of uh, perhaps more deeply exploring, because I think last time we spoke to when I had written The Age of Separateness, which was more about climate change denial. And I've moved on to sort of everyday denial and the kind of, I guess, speciesism and lack of perspective that humans generally have about um, not just climate change, but generally about the role on the planet, about the reality, and how blind we are because of a system that blinds us. So I've been looking at things like fake news.
Mhm.
I've been looking at things like COVID. I've been writing a lot about COVID because, unlike many people who say, "Oh, I'm tired of hearing about COVID," I'm like, "No, I've been writing a lot about COVID because COVID is completely about climate change and collapse." So I can talk about COVID a lot. I can. Um, I've been. I've been exploring uh, things like, well, the inevitability of collapse, and I've been kind of coming more um, to peace with it
Mhm.
because every time you feel like you've reckoned yourself with it and you're in peace with it, you realize there's another step, there's yet another step. You're still slightly in denial and you're still slightly hoping. And that's completely fine. That's completely fine. It's expected. I do it as well. Um, anyway, no, there's loads. I think that we're probably going to end up having a free form conversation anyway, but I'm quite open
Yeah.
to to kind of find a midway between what's more top of mind from your end and from my end.
Great. Yeah, I do agree. It promises to be an ever morphing conversation. So off we go. I'm uh, I'm appreciating your bringing up the inevitability of collapse. In fact, I might just nudge it a bit further that we are full tilt in it and have been for a while. And what's a bit encouraging actually is that it's getting closer and closer to common parlance that we are indeed experiencing the collapse of the human caused collapse of Earth and human systems. And for me, that's an immense relief. The gaslighting and the willful ignorance generated in the smoke and mirrors show for the years leading up to now
Mm.
has just been exhausting, just deeply exhausting and toxic. So, to whatever degree, as painful as it might be, whether it's through COVID deaths or through riots, I think it's a truth that desperately needed to get to reach the light of day. So that's,
And I think the lockdown as well has made people realize that they were not happy. None of us were happy. We were living in a system of commuting, polluting, spending money on clothes we don't need, spending money on stuff we don't need, spending our time on things and jobs that we didn't need, that were destroying the planet and destroying ourselves, our mental
yeah,
health, our physical health. I think no one really wants to go back to that. We want to have some kind of income, of course. We want to have some kind of security, but we definitely, the people I speak to, definitely don't want to go back.
yeah,
Uh, and I think that is an instinctual response to the fact that the big C, capitalism, though it's much, much bigger, it's not just when you say capitalism, people still think that you're talking about economic terms. I'm using the term capitalism a lot more broadly. It's
yeah,
our whole civilization, the system of our civilization, the system of exploitation, of profit, of natural destruction, of exponential growth.
yeah,
Even if we had communism, it would still advocate exponential growth. It would still be capitalist.
yeah,
Um, so that system is failing, and that system is why we are coming to a collapse. We're running out of resources, running out of everything. Siberia is on 30 degrees.
yeah,
No one's talking about it. Absolutely no one. Um, so yeah, it's good. It's good that people are coming to more of a realization
yeah.
and are coming to peace with it.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're having multiple conversations of that type. Um, I would say that it's it's still quite rare in my circles to really engage in that kind of conversation, and I think we're even further from that kind of coming to peace with it that you're talking about. And it seems like you're some number of months or perhaps even years ahead of the USA in the circles you're talking to.
Yes and no. I mean, a lot of the articles I write about, both in my book and outside of my book, is about how denial will actually continue even
Mm,
until the bitter end, because this is a mechanism that we have developed by our evolution. It's how we survive. We survive by denying risk. It is a survival strategy that is very, very efficient, because if you think of dangers that are only immediate, then obviously you've made the right choice.
hmm.
You've only thought about what is an immediate risk to life. Is climate change an immediate risk to life? No, it's not. Is it the actual end of the world and it's irreversible? Yes, it is. But our minds have evolved in a time of plenty, a time of facing immediate dangers only, a time of incredible stability, that they're not actually built to think long term.
Hmm.
And I think I would find trouble. I would get in a lot of arguments with people over this thing. What do you mean, George? You're saying we're stupid? You're saying we can't really care about things that are going to happen 20, 30, 40 years down the line? And my answer is, yeah,
Hmm.
essentially. We are stupid. Um, we are not able to think that way.
Yeah. You know, there's
And
a,
so, well, because I think if we all knew, if, for example, if I were to tell you, Dean, that, well, there's a miracle drug and you're going to live for 300 years, your outlook would immediately be very, very different. You would start to care a tiny bit more about, well, I think on year 200, I was, eventually be able to have that house by the beach, which means that I do want a beach to exist, which means that I do want a planet with oceans instead of deserts. So yeah, I think, but then again, that's why we have all these systems. That's why we have capitalism. That's why we have religion, to delude us, to give us a pill that is going to sweeten the damage, and it's going to help us deny things. So we're surrounded by denial. A whole world is fake, and it has been getting faker and faker.
Yeah. Can you say more about that? Like, what are you seeing? It sounds like you're spending quite a bit of time on that topic. And um, how did we start that process going? When did it really start getting traction? And what is fueling that growing trend of more and more of our world is fake, less and less has integrity or truth involved with it? Where did it come from, and what's been fueling it?
Well, it came from the development of sophisticated civilizations. The more sophisticated a civilization becomes, the more it develops sophisticated systems of communication, indoctrination, and control. And today we have the most efficient systems. So, capitalism, for example, is the biggest marketing scam that ever existed. It is the biggest propaganda. It basically told humanity that, look, you can grow and grow and grow exponentially in a planet with finite resources. And we all believed it. We all believed it because we thought, that's a great idea. It went into a religion, the parable of the feeding of the 5,000. It went into our children's stories, Jack and the Beanstalk. It went into every aspect of our culture,
Mm-hmm.
this exponential growth. And with it, we were also held hostages. We were held hostages to our salaries. Politicians were held hostage to exponential growth. And the climate scientists were held hostage to their research grants because none of them have the guts to actually say what is on their mind, because they're going to be seen as a doomer. So, yeah, it started with growth in our society, which we wanted to turn into a machine, turn it into an exponential growth. And it has accelerated because we became so good at that, so efficient.
Yeah.
The more it accelerated, the more busy our lives became. And the more busy humans become, the less straight they can see. So, in some of my more dark essays, I talk about how we have essentially been zombified in many ways,
Mm-hmm.
from our use of technology to the way that we consume news, the way that we interact with information, the way that we interact with people, all the things about social media that everyone's very well aware of, that it all becomes very transactional and all becomes very asleep.
Yeah.
We're doing things very mechanically, and we're going to basically walk ourselves into our death without even realizing it. I mean, we are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Siberia is at 30 degrees and no one's talking about it, and everyone's talking about Black Lives Matter, which is important, but it's only one of the thousands of side effects
Mm-hmm.
of our capitalist society, because capitalism used racial prejudice and exploitation, for its colonialism, for its economic powerhouse, then we are not really seeing the big picture.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that layout, and essentially, I think we're in agreement. I don't remember. I probably have laid out my particular perspective on how we got here. When I wrote my own book in 2017, The Impossible Conversation, the punchline was, well, first the question was, what got us into this predicament? And no matter which way I looked, the answer always came back as some variant of the response that we've disconnected. We've disconnected from all the primary sources of meaning and relationship in human life. And that was really the ticket in. If I want to enjoy some of the benefits of this business as usual human operating system, I've got to set aside those very sensitive inner measures of, am I living in the right way? Am I relating in the right way? I need to be able to override all those inner warning signs that something is wrong. And we've become absolutely masterful at overriding all those very normal, very human, actually quite beautiful warning systems that tell us when we're off. And that is what I believe I'm hearing you describe.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might be being a little bit kinder than me to humanity. I think there's this false perception that we are intelligent, which I really contest. I think intelligence is, yes, we have incredible brain power, but brain power is, of course, not intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Intelligence is emotional intelligence, it is
Mm-hmm.
spiritual intelligence, it is all of these things, and it is one of the, again, false directions that we took as beings that wanted to exploit resources more, that we judged intelligence in sort of quantitative measures,
Yeah.
and we judged intelligence as a problem-solving skill, when actually intelligence is not about problem solving. So you've got all these biologists around the world throwing octopus in a tank and seeing how soon it's going to get itself out of trouble, or how, whether the monkey is going to choose the right button to press to get food, and they consider that intelligence, when
Right.
actually that's only a very, very tiny fragment of intelligence that essentially it is to us. It was, again, about the right here, right now. How can I survive right now? How can I push the button to get a treat? And that problem solving actually becomes a problem in itself, because we become the perfect predator. And again, thinking more broadly in biological terms, we
Mm-hmm.
are the super predator on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that nature has to control the population sizes of predators is two ways. One way is that we run out of food, which we will, because we are sitting right at the top of a food pyramid, right
Mm-hmm.
at the top of it, which is right now collapsing because of the 6 max extinction. So we're going to be falling spectacularly from the top of that pyramid. But the other way in which nature has to control a population of predators is cannibalism, which happens a lot, and there's a basis for cannibalism. It is there so that at least some of the predators can survive by eating each other, because they will be needed after the next extinction event. And this is what, of course, we do to each other. We don't literally eat each other, but we have world wars. We have all these annihilations, which are, to me, as a biologist, that's a natural phenomenon. So to me, we are following right in the path of what is expected of us as biological beings. And this is what is even more alarming, because you would think, but we're smart, but we've done this, we've done that, we've even gone to the moon. Well, some people contest whether that's true or not.
Right.
But essentially, we think that we can get ourselves out of this mess. And that is not surprising, because this position that we've had on top of this food chain has made us incredibly arrogant. And we might be talking about Black Lives Matter, but I mean, the level of disrespect that we have as a species for other life forms is beyond, beyond. I think it's beyond comprehension for a modern human that's been living in this, in this huge supermarket, where you go to the supermarket and all you see is life forms just packaged in plastic. And then, I mean, how do you expect us to care about other races? And this is what capitalism did. Capitalism basically said, Black people are not people. They're just animals that have been brought in to work. Species don't, they just go extinct by themselves. We didn't do this. It's the fake news started a very, very long time ago, and 75% of our history books have to be completely rewritten. We're living very exciting days where we're seeing statues being toppled. Not only in the US, it's happening around the world, and it's great to see that. It's very, very long overdue, but what is really important to see is to see the big picture. This is not only about race. This is about capitalism. This is about our entire civilization. This is about our separation from ourselves, our true nature, our happiness, our family, our children that we are disrespecting. First, by bringing them to life in the first place, when we know where this planet is heading to. And by not listening to them, by not listening to Greta Thunberg and all the child activists that are saying, hey, what about my life?
Yeah, really well said. I'm curious, George, where more or less at a similar, in a similar position in culture, one way or another, we're speaking with people, we're offering particular framing of the world in either writing or videos or online coursework or whatever it is. A systems designer, a regenerative systems designer named Joe Brewer, that I've also interviewed here on the podcast. And I remember asking him, you've got all these lofty, wonderful ideas of, biomimicry and regenerative systems, and inviting people to come and learn about these things and possibly, take them back to where they live and make some sort of experimental project of regenerative design in their area. And I almost can hear you thinking from way over here. At least I think you are. I certainly am. At this point in the conversation, I'm thinking, those are lofty things, and it's easily 30 years too late. So why are people even bothering? in any case, that's something that I'm thinking quite often in those conversations. All that cynicism aside.
Solving again. I'm not against science. I have 3 science degrees myself.
Yeah.
I've worked in science for many, many decades, um, and done complicated things in the lab. I've cloned things. I've discovered new things. I've done stuff. I've published papers. But again, it goes back to that kind of false perception as a humanity that we can find a cure, we can find a pill, we can find a little gadget that's going to get us out of the hole that we're in, which is a very false perception, because if you eliminate all life on Earth, you can't, it's just fine. You're going to grow all your food in greenhouses. Really? I don't buy that. I think before that happens, a conversation is about to get a bit darker, but before that happens, there's going to be quite a few billion of people dying.
Yeah.
There's going to be, as we know, a very, very, very uninhabitable planet in huge swathes of the equatorial regions. I mean, look, within a couple of years from now, there's not going to be no summer ice in the Arctic. Another thing that no one's talking about. Paul Beckwith is tearing his hair out every day, and so yeah, there is a lot of arrogance in humans that they think they can get themselves out of the hole, and they look for the scientific solutions, which is really interesting because the solutions are very simple. It's just you need to plant 500 billion trees on the planet within the next month. Do that, and you're going to be almost halfway there and reduce your CO2 emissions. But we don't look at those things because they are not the smart, gadgety solutions. They are too humble for us to consider.
Right.
And of course, there's a lot of political cost, which goes back to the whole conversation of being hostage to grants, hostage to votes, hostage to profit margins, companies being hostage to the stock market because the bottom line has to continue to increase, otherwise their stock is going to crash. We're hostages in a car where the brakes have been broken and there's nothing we can do to slow down. And that car is capitalism.
Yeah, thank you. I find myself again just basically on the same page. Let me just pull a little bit further on the thread that I was mentioning with the Joe Brewer comment, and that is that I asked him, how could a person come to one of your classes or one of the experimental ranches that you might be putting together, and how could they come prepared internally? What are the internal facilities or internal capacities or core competencies that a person could have that would have them be more functional, more able to be up and running and engage with some sort of new way of being, new way of operating with human beings in a region like that? He answered almost immediately that they would for sure need 2 things. One is an advanced self-regulation, the ability to self-regulate, to be able to be in a preferred state or to be able to return to a preferred state when knocked out of that state by whatever the stressors are that are going on. And the other thing that he was mentioning is psychological flexibility. And so I've been really pursuing a tremendous amount of that type of, I've been going down that rabbit hole for a while, looking at what are the core capacities that a person might have as they're facing the collapse of human and Earth systems. And I'm curious, do you have any take on what are some of the core capacities that would be really smart to be building
I
out?
mean, self-regulation to me sounds a little bit vague and abstract, and also a little bit control freaky without wanting to be critical there. To
Mm,
me, it's more about actually broad thinking, being able to see the whole world in front of you and where you sit within that whole world. Again, it's about less arrogance and more compassion. And the way that you achieve that is by realizing that you are just another one of the billions, millions of life forms.
hmm
And you're not actually the most important one. That's what you think. Humans think that they're actually too good for Earth. They think, come on, dude. You probably think as well, just we all think that we are not actually from here. We came from outer space. We are too good for this planet. You know, who else on this planet has a car like that, a computer like that? You know, we are deluded. We think that we are too good for this planet, and this is why we are eating, exploiting all the other beings in here, because we think that we have the right to, because we are better.
Yeah.
There's this incredible old-fashioned species and what I call biochauvinism. Just coined that word. It just came to me one day because I wanted to describe this incredible arrogance that we never talk about, because the only people that we talk about things like that with are other humans. I mean, think about it. You know, it's like, you know, it's like killer whales having a conversation in between them about, you know, I think that, you know, our prey have some rights. And they're having this, you know, conference with other killer whales in there. Their prey has absolutely no representation. And this is the quite sad thing in all this, that animals can't really speak and they will never speak. Their silence, I think, if anything, says a lot more. They
hmm
don't. They speak. I think, the physical laws and um, the inevitability of Earth's circular systems and geological processes is what, in the end, uh, determines where we go.
Yeah.
Same with COVID. You know, Trump doesn't decide when to open the country. The COVID virus decides when to open the country.
hmm
So yeah, now my suggestion in terms of the skills that we need in psychological capacities is really is compassion that comes from an awareness of who we are and where we are, and that we are not in this planet. This planet was not made for us. It is here with us. We are the planet. We are part of it.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't take me much to just do a little tweaking of a word here and there, and that seems like a very similar landing place to um, really the punchline of my body of work, which is the only thing I can see for us to do. Someone who's conscious and facing into our very obvious imminent future, the only thing I can see worth doing is to reconnect ourselves with the web of life. Whatever that means for you when you look into where am I disconnected and how might I disconnect, excuse me, how might I reconnect with life in a more rich and nourishing and system equal way. So I indirectly hear a similarity in what you were saying. I also appreciate you're using the word compassion quite a bit. Can you say how you define that? Because it seems like you're using it far more than just how human beings see and experience each other. It
To me,
seems like you,
compassion is awareness.
sorry?
To me, compassion is awareness,
Hmm.
and to me, these words are actually interchangeable, because you can only have empathy if you are aware of what you are, who you are on this planet. We think that we are not of this earth. We think that we are invincible. We think, like all predators or super predators, that there is no predator for us. And of course, predators end up having um, the most spectacular collapse of all the species, because it happens very sudden for the predators. They completely fall out of grace from one day to the next.
Yeah.
Again, just using the biological parable, all biologists say, oh, we've got tigers, we've got sharks. That's great. That means that it's a healthy ecosystem. That's what they always say. Exactly, because the nature has lots of prey to give. We are coming to a situation where we're using 37% of the land surface just to grow crops, and most of those are not even for us. They're either to produce ethanol for our cars or to produce soybeans for the beef that's growing in Brazil, grazing on a raised rainforest. La 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 la. I can just keep going
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
about this and the circle of destruction that's going on around the planet. So we've already exhausted the, you know, think, thinking really basically here just about food, because I think food is going to be the sort of biggest wake-up call, because it's the most basic thing, isn't it? Food is something that we cannot live without for, for a week,
Right.
for a day, for some people. So I think once that happens, to be honest, it is starting to happen. Um, it will be the next stage.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm not at all clear. I don't think we've talked about the relatively new distinction that has been brought up by a guy named Jem Bendell in the UK, of deep adaptation. You familiar with that stuff? Yeah. So I'm curious. It literally sounds like an overlap, a direct overlap with what you're saying right now at this moment, with central pieces of his original paper, Jem's original paper. And he came up with this idea of the 4 R's of um, of deep adaptation. And I'm curious, does that ring a bell? Is that a useful tool in these times from your perspective? How do you jive with deep adaptation as you see it?
Well, deep adaptation is one of the very few uh, systems of thought that have accepted that our predicament is that of decline, and it is based on science. It is based on Jan Bendel is a professor of sustainability, so it draws directly out of studying very basic principles of demand and supply. It, so yeah, the supply is not there anymore, and the demand is almost 9 billion people. Something, I think, something like, I don't know what, 90 something percent of all mammal populations, I think, by weight
The
is
biomass. Yeah.
is like human bodies. I mean, it's literally just looking, and that number might be incorrect, but it's some insane number. It's literally just looking, putting my microbiology hat on for a second at that petri dish, and you could see that,
Yeah.
or culture flask, and you can see that the food you have in there is being converted into bodies until there's nothing left but bodies. And the collapse that comes after that, because I've measured the mortality rate, is cataclysmic. It's you just really literally just collapse. And you always have some small percentage that survives. But it really goes down very quickly.
Mhm. And I'm curious with the notions of resilience and reconciliation. Let me see if I can remember all four off the top of my head. I'm just curious if that type of mnemonic, that type of way of just organizing our view of what's going on is useful from your
Well,
perspective.
of course, you need resilience, because what are you going to do? Give up? Right?
Right. Yeah.
And you need reconciliation, because reconciliation is reconciliate yourself with the reality of what is going to happen.
Hmm.
It's a an awareness led survival response,
Hmm.
and it is really great because this kind of I think system, because I don't remember the 4 R's, but it is very much uh, mental health led,
Yeah.
because that is the key uh, uh, the key element to unlock, and the most difficult element to unlock is human denial. So reconciliation with the situation, which again, for the vast majority of people will never happen. I talk a lot about that in my books and in my blogs, which is this kind of hyper normalization of a situation. I think the psychological term for it is the normalcy uh, syndrome, which is, the worse, the more things deteriorate, the more you get used to a situation, and you accept it. But you accept it to a level that is not a conscious level. You accept it as the next best thing.
Yeah.
But then very soon you have forgotten what the best thing was, because you can't have that anymore. And this is what has happened to humanity in terms of our quality of life. We think that our quality of life has increased, when actually it has decreased quite substantially.
Hmm.
Um, our modern medicine is helping us to deal with uh, hugely higher rates of cancer, of mental health, uh, and yet we still kind of try to delude ourselves. So because we have stuff, because we have iPhones and all these things, that we are, that our life is improving. Um, so so yeah, I'm completely on board.
Okay. Um, I like that you just looped us back to kind of the fake news side of the conversation, and I'm just looking. I have a one of your articles from Medium up on my screen, and I just keep noticing out of the corner of my eye, there's a new machine in town, and this one is determined to commit suicide once it runs out of substrate and the stuff to burn. And you've already made a really clear and bold point of just the impossibility, the obvious impossibility of infinite growth, and that whole predicament. I'm curious if you could say more about this dynamic that we are all obviously in, and it seems to be, there's a guy, a psychologist, 30 years ago wrote a book, The People of the Lie. And it seems like really that's what this time is. It's the time of the lie. I'm really curious by your use of the word suicide. I've also used the word death cult to have the elements at the scale that they're at right now and have been for quite a while. It looks like we are really wanting to go as fast as we can.
I wouldn't say wanting to go. I think we're just stupid. It goes back to what I was saying about the predator. The predator doesn't know that the end is coming. They don't. They think that they will keep eating forever. The sharks think that they will keep eating forever and multiplying. So do the tigers. They don't know that their end is coming because there is an availability of food. That's what I think, and I think that there's increasing awareness of that. You know, the predator here is capitalism. You know, you read people like Cornel West, you know, talks about predatory capitalism and how it relates to race. He makes that connection very clear. And you've got Klein. She talks about disaster capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
All of these versions of capitalism are the one and the same capitalism. And what it is a system of exploitation and destruction and oppression that also comes with a very, very sophisticated marketing department. And that's where the fake news come in.
Mm-hmm.
The marketing department, the main aspect of that is basically give people rewards, have a reward system. You know, salaries and needs and products that people don't really need. But the more you create these needs in people and then you fulfill them, the more they think that they're actually happy. They think that they are living in a nice world.
I think this is my turn in the conversation to kind of nudge you in a direction that I think you give humanity more credit in this particular part of the conversation than I do. I don't take humanity off the hook that we just don't know, that we're a predator that just doesn't know until the last moment. I think that there's an extraordinary, vivid awareness of what's going on. And it's literally down to like cashing out at the casino level of awareness and manipulation of the systems so that the people who have access to gathering more and more and more wealth and power are indeed doing that with some pretty clear awareness of this is quite likely the last chapter of humanity.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you, Dean. I think you take the elites, for example, you know, they're preparing their own bunkers. It is quite shocking, isn't it?
Yeah. Have you heard the
It's the same
Doug
with
Rushkoff's?
the fossil fuel companies that are putting out these marketing campaigns that look, we've got 30 years to save the earth. You know, we don't have to decrease our emissions.
Yeah.
But then you talk to them in private and they're preparing their bunker,
Right.
their panic rooms and and whatnot, and whatever it is that rich people do, that they will get them out in trouble. Little do they know that their own security guards are probably going to kill them in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. There is actually a lot of awareness. Um, I think I think there's maybe a lot of both. There is awareness in some circles, and there is, I think, a lot of denial as well in other circles. I think some of the ordinary people that I speak to still are under the impression that we're going to find a solution.
Yeah.
Spoke to a close family member quite a few months ago. I said, I'm sure that, when this shit really hits the fan, they're going to find some amazing way to sequester that CO2 from the air. And I'm like, oh. And they have kids, and they have a busy life, and
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to loop back one more time to that Joe Brewer comment and just tease apart one last piece of it, and that is it's a little bit closer to the work that I do with folks, individuals, and organizations, and that is to find ways of being together, ways of doing the kind of inner work that could truly expand our capacity to be more fully human, have more of an access to the parts of ourselves that we've had to shut down to live within the lie. They range from the really simple, the things like circling, or call it focusing, call it authentic relating, empathy circles. There are 1,000 methodologies now for people to come together in a fairly easy to learn way, to be together in a more compassionate and mutually supportive way. So that would be on the relatively easier end of the scale of things that one can do to expand capacity to be present in the face of whatever's coming. And there are many others, and there are certainly other kinds of inner work that take a lot more rigor and really take some serious commitment, and they're tough. But I can speak from some experience that it's truly worthwhile. As you and I were checking in with each other at the beginning of this call, I don't know what I would have done without, these past 3 months in particular, without the practices that I have on a daily basis that keep me, having enough space, literally having enough space to hold these daily barrages of trauma and so on. I'm curious if you have any particular practices or ways of being with yourself in your own inner work, or with others, that really help you through the tougher times.
We live in a very hectic world, all of us. You mentioned the word space, and you just had me at hello, because space is such a beautiful word, isn't it? Emptiness. It's just an amazing thought to have. And it's one of the basic tenets of meditation, is that about trying to elongate that space between thoughts. What I try to do is just create space in my life. Just continuously ask myself at every point of the day, did that really matter that much to make me upset?
Right.
In the grand scheme of things, how important is that? Can I just be grateful of the food that I have in the house, which a good billion or so other people on this planet don't have?
Yeah.
And that immediately puts a smile on my face. I think it's the small things. I think it's what all the surveys are showing, that gratitude is about being able to appreciate the small things. And um, yes, you can go to, you know, fancy kind of therapy sessions, but I think if everyone took a month off and went and lived in a village where they had to figure out their own breakfast every morning, wash their face with cold water, and come to a point where they don't care whether they're sparkly clean all the time, but they have meaningful conversations, they have nurturing interactions with animals and with the life around them. They realize what is actually meaningful in life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what shows up on your iPhone screen. It's actually the things that we think are mundane, which is going and watering your plants, making something, making some food, things that we consider boring because they're not really your perfect Instagram post, are they? We are addicted to achievement. And again, this goes back to capitalism. It's work more, do more. What's on your list? What do you got on your list? How many videos did you upload today, Dean, on your channel, your YouTube channel? It's all about, all these things, and it's kind of a false sense of happiness.
Right.
Sometimes doing nothing, creating that empty space is unfortunately has become a luxury. And we have to now teach people how to find space. But hey ho, I think the whole rise in the need for meditation
Mm-hmm.
is very sad, because meditation to me is not something that we learn. I think meditation is something that all of us can do innately. It is built into us.
Mm-hmm.
We have just forgotten how to do it because we've had all these, expectations from ourselves. When you walk to the bus stop, what did you do before you had a phone and you had nothing to look at? You meditated. As you walked to the bus stop, you meditated. That was back in the 80s. We're losing these really, really important pockets of space that we used to have. We're losing them very fast, and we are becoming literally zombified, because this then reinforces itself. It becomes a habitual response. So we turn on the radio in our car and we think we're listening to the news, but we're not listening to the news. We're not listening to anything. We're just mechanically, we're paying as much attention to the news as we are to the advertisements in between the news, which is why the news is playing in the first place. Capitalism is trying to sell us stuff.
Yeah.
News has merged with entertainment. News has become entertainment. That's another big conversation, but it's a very important conversation because people don't realize how much they're being manipulated.
George, it's just always a joy to speak with you. And I just realized, I don't know why I didn't put this together before, but you are a science communicator. As I consider you a science communicator, whether you call yourself that or not. I've really been in search of truthful, bold, clear, human science communicators. And there aren't many. And I want you to know.
Because they kind of you have to straddle two worlds, I think, to be.
Of course you do. I absolutely understand the pressures, and there are many in our incredibly conflicted world. Science communicators are in an unfortunate kind of pivot point, but I still hold all of y'all to a very, very high standard. And I can count the number of science communicators that I hold in high esteem on one hand and have a couple of fingers left over. And you're one of those people. There's a boldness, there's a clarity, there's the willingness to just tell the truth from your perspective, tell your truth, and then to be able to use that as a carrier wave to carry the what I call the sober data that you are fairly well aware of. And it's a vitally important role that unfortunately very, very few of people who have your level of expertise and articulation. It's really unfortunate that there are so few. So I'm feeling really grateful for being able to have this conversation and to be able to have another conversation, perhaps, from time to time. That's it's literally renewing in my system to hear someone who knows what they're talking about, that doesn't get on one end of the spectrum or the other to tell really just a formidable lie and call it reality and call it science communication. So I just wanted to let you know that. It just dawned on me that more than an author on Medium, which is where I encounter you most often, I'm really appreciating right now that role. Do you consider yourself a science communicator?
I'm a biologist, I'm a chemist, I'm a molecular biologist. I haven't been practicing that field for a long time, but basically what I am is a person who can understand climate change, data, and their implication better than it is for my own good. I've actually stopped following the data for a few years now because there's no point really. We all know where it's going. So yeah, I consider myself a kind of slightly more broader. I guess a science communicator usually says, I don't know. I mean, all these sort of titles we try to put on each other, I think, are never fair. You can never describe the person in 2 words. I think I'm kind of a broader thinker. What my sort of my calling has led me to over the years is a sort of philosophical and almost theological and spiritual understanding of our predicament. But I am very much led by science and by biology, because understanding our biology, which is what we are a biological being. We are actually a life form, holds a lot of the keys to unlocking much of our behavior, from the way that our brain has evolved to the way that we behave as a predator. A lot of it can be predicted and understood through biology.
Yeah.
And although the conclusions are very dark, I find them reassuring.
Really good. Well, I've got a little space in my upcoming schedule, and I'm looking forward to catching up with some of your most recent work. I don't think I have your newest book. I literally have forgotten what have I actually got, and what have I not yet put on my bedside table for reading. I will be doing that, and I'm so pleased that we get to have these conversations. I got a couple of questions for you offline when we close up here, so please stick around. And George, I just want to thank you. Thanks so much for your time and for your most excellent writing. and for bringing your gifts to the reading public, to the world that's at least the few of us that are ready to listen, to read and listen to your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.